Okay, last class we evolved the Thevenin equivalent circuit because exact equivalent circuit may be difficult to analyze by very closed form expressions. So some approximations are done by neglecting core laws, and then we drew that Thevenin equivalent circuit. So in this lecture we will continue on the Thevenin equivalent circuit and its uses, and also we will also introduce what are the methods of starting of induction motors. Now this is the Thevenin equivalent circuit we drew in the last lecture, where the actual equivalent circuit, this was the actual equivalent circuit, ZS, ZR, Zm are the impedances, and looking at these XY points, you can from this point, this portion, okay, this portion, you get copies made, okay, 40 copies, okay. Now we have written the ZT as the equivalent impedance, and then the voltage across this we have call it as VT, Thevenin voltage across these 2 points, looking from this side, okay. Now the equivalent circuit VT was Zm by Zm plus Zs into Vs, and Zt is Zm Zs over Zm plus Zs, that is equal to RT plus JXT. So you can write down as VT RT JXT, then rotor circuit doesn't change because it is as it is, JXLR and RR by S. So this is the equivalent circuit that we get as a Thevenin equivalent circuit, okay. And we know the elements that is RT XT as a real imagery of a ZT, whereas ZS is RS plus JXLS and Zm is JXM, because we have ignored the core loss, okay. Now the performance equations, if you look at it, will be like this. The IS will be same as IR, you know, this will be same as IR, okay. Then that is VT over RT plus RR by S plus J times XT plus XLR, because this current that is flowing here will be VT divided by this impedance, that is RT plus RR by S plus J times XT plus XLR, right. That will be the current that will be flowing here, and that means this will be basically the phasor, but if you want to know the magnitude, IR will be VT divided by square root of RT plus RR by S whole square plus XT plus XLR whole square. This is just an impedance. You have taken real part, imaginary part, and just current will be the VT divided by the magnitude of this impedance. Magnitude of the impedance is nothing but RT plus RR by S whole square plus XT plus XLR whole square, okay. Now the torque would be IR square RR by S, where IR is the magnitude again, okay. IR square RR by S. So you know the expression for IR, right. The torque is 3 by omega S into IR square RR by S, and now if you substitute that, it is 3 by omega S into IR square is nothing but VT square into RR by S divided by this impedance, square is RT plus RR by S whole square plus XT plus XLR whole square, isn't it? So we have got an expression for torque, an approximate expression for torque in terms of Thevenin voltage, Thevenin resistance and reactance, and actual RR and XLR. So we have now an expression for torque in terms of the parameters with the Thevenin quantities, okay. Now having known the expression for torque, we will be concerned with maximum torque, because this torque expression will be for any slip. This torque is for any slip, right. So for any slip you can get an expression for torque. Now what is the maximum torque? Maximum torque will be to only at that slip when S is equal to, so T is equal to T max when slip is S at maximum torque, right? There is only one torque. We have seen in the last class. In this we have got the typical torque speed characteristics where this is the maximum torque when the slip is, we call it as slip at maximum torque. There is only one slip at maximum torque. You want to know at that slip what will be the torque and what is that slip. So next question is, can we get some type of a expression for getting that slip at maximum torque? Now the logic goes as follows to get that slip at maximum torque. That is, what is our torque expression? Is torque expression is whatever is the power that is absorbed by this element, isn't it? Power absorbed, when that power is maximum, then torque is maximum. So because this is IR square RR by S, so when will the power absorbed by this element be maximum? There is a maximum power transfer theorem. That is at that value of slip in which the impedance here will be equivalent to the rest of the impedance. Right? When RR by S becomes equal to this impedance, that is a condition for maximum torque. So we now can evolve a condition for maximum torque. So at maximum torque, that is S is equal to S max T, the condition, this is the condition. When RR by S max T is equal to the remaining impedance, RT square plus XT plus XLR whole square. This, because this is the remaining impedance, that is RT square plus XT plus XLR whole square, square root of that. So when that is equal to, so when the impedance, this is from the maximum power transfer theorem, maximum power transfer theorem. If you use that theorem, we get a condition for maximum torque and condition will be at this. That means S max T will be, what will be S max T now? Will be RR over that impedance. Isn't it? S max T will be the resistance divided by that impedance as here. And we have to substitute that S max T in that expression for torque which we have already got. That means what you do is, this is the expression for torque. For that expression for torque, you substitute RR by S from that expression, right, and find T max. So if you do that, we get this expression for torque max. T max would be equal to 3 by 2 omega S Vt square over RT plus square root of RT square plus XT plus XLR square. So we now get an expression for maximum torque as given like this. Okay. So what we have done is, we have found a condition for S, what is the slip at which maximum torque occurs and what is that maximum torque. We have substituted that value. Now what do you observe in this expression? You have got an expression for T max. What do you observe?
Independent of RR.
So this is most important thing, is this is independent of RR. So we get an important conclusion that in the three-phase induction motor, maximum torque doesn't depend upon the rotor resistance. Okay, but slip at maximum torque would depend, because slip at maximum torque is RR over this, but S max T depends on RR. This is the thing that you will have. Okay, so we get from this logic. Now what you can do is, we can write down now what will be the torque speed characteristics at different rotor resistance. Okay, so we have low rotor resistance, let us say RR which is 1, which is low. You have these characteristics. Now if you increase RR, what will happen? If you increase RR, let's give it to them. Give one to each. Now we have let us say RR2. Okay, but maximum torque doesn't. Maximum torque is same. So you will find that the maximum torque doesn't change, but your slip at maximum torque will change. So this will be S max 1 and this will be S max 2 because RR has changed. Okay. If you go further, let us say RR3. So this will be RR3. Okay. Now again you have slip at maximum torque has again gone up. So this is S max 3. Okay. And you can further take, still increase the resistance. So what we are doing is we are trying to see if the rotor resistance increase, what will happen. Increase the resistance further. So this may be RR4. Okay. So what we have done is we have increased the rotor resistance, but maximum torque remains the same. Interestingly, what you find is my RR4, I am shifting the maximum torque to also the starting torque. Here T maximum is also the T starting because this is the starting at 0 speed. Okay. So this will be an interesting conclusion. Thus, so you can have a maximum starting torque at high resistance. Okay. So at this case, so what is S max here? S max is 1. Okay. Now torque at this is 1 means that you can get a very high starting torque by increasing the rotor resistance to a suitable value, because it may even increase further. The maximum torque will be at S is equal to more than 1 at negative speed. So you can have this also. So you can have hypothetically, or you can even have another characteristics, whereas RR5. Okay. So this is an important thing that, but you are told that if you slip, if the operating slip increases, rotor loss increases. Rotor loss is slip times air gap power. Rotor loss increases, rotor gets heated. And so it is desirable to have low rotor resistance. But if you have a low rotor resistance, starting torque is poor. Okay. So this will be the good run performance. This characteristic is a good run performance. Low slip, if a slip is low rotor resistance, a good run performance. This will be a good start. Therefore, high rotor resistance, good start, low rotor resistance, good run. But you want both. It must start well, you must run well. Okay. Therefore, ideally you must have a varying rotor resistance, but that is not possible in squirrel cage machines generally. Slip ring machines it is possible. If you can connect an external resistance and increase the rotor resistance so that it gives you a good starting torque, and go on decreasing resistance, it comes to the running condition. So you have the good running performance and a good starting performance. So this is a compromise, right? So your rotor design is therefore crucial. So what we conclude is rotor design is critical. So this is what we conclude, right? Rotor, whatever you have. So our major findings are the following. What do we conclude now from whatever discussions and arguments we had till now? We conclude that rotor resistance is a critical parameter. Then low rotor resistance will give you a good run performance. Low rotor resistance gives a good run performance, and high rotor resistance gives a good start performance, right? Then maximum torque is independent of rotor resistance. This is the next conclusion. We have maximum torque is independent of rotor resistance, and the start at maximum torque, slip at maximum torque is proportional to rotor resistance. So rotor resistance decides the slip at maximum torque, not the magnitude of maximum torque. Okay. So therefore, controlling rotor resistance, we may get good starting and a good running performance. So you may have a good start performance and a good run performance by having a controlled rotor resistance. So these are the major findings that we have got. Okay. Now, from the Thevenin equivalent circuit that we have got, we can get an approximate expression for torque. So this is a derivation I suggest you can try. You have an expression for torque, you neglect stator resistance, right? We have got the expression for torque, you neglect the stator resistance, right? You neglect the stator resistance and then you find out what is the torque. Okay, then you know the T max expression. So we will get, if we neglect the stator resistance, we can derive an approximate expression for torque at any slip. So torque at any slip over T max is given by twice S over S max T plus S max T by S. So you can try this expression, you can try to get this expression. That is T by T max is equal to twice S by S max T plus S max T by S. It will require certain, all you do is neglect the stator resistance and derive the expression using the Thevenin equivalent circuit. Okay. That means this way, if so long as you know T max and S max, you can find out a torque at any slip, right? Torque at any slip can be obtained. Okay. And the torque at starting will be, you put S is equal to 1. So if you want to torque, starting torque over maximum torque will be 2 over S is 1 over S max T plus S max T. So which means, supposing, I am just giving an example. Let us say S max T is 0.1. Let us say T max, let us say, is 2 per unit. So what will be T starting by T max? Will be 2 over S max T by S max is 0.1 plus 10, right? It is 2 over 10.1. Okay. Therefore, that will be the so T start will be 2 over 10.1 into, let us say, T max is 2 per unit. So approximately 4 by 10 or approximately 0.4 per unit. So starting torque will be 0.4 per unit under this condition. So this way you can approximately calculate the starting torque. Okay. Okay, now we have seen that starting performance is important and running performance is important, and we can now look at the issue of starting methods, which can be obtained in are used in induction machines. Okay. So in next few minutes we will we briefly discuss about the starting methods and what is the technique used in starting. Okay. Now you must you can imagine why starting method at all. Why do you need starting of why any special method to start? You take a motor and just connect the supply and close the switch, it should start. There should not be much of a problem. Now the problems are as follows. One is we have to perforce limit the starting current. See, if you look at the normal characteristics of a machine, torque speed characteristics or the current speed characteristics, we got this following. You see, this will be the torque and then we had this will be the current. Now this is somewhere, you know, if this is 100%, this may be around 5 per unit or so, 4 or 5 per unit starting current, and of course starting torque may be 1 per unit, or let us say 1 per unit approximately. Okay. Now starting torque is not high, but starting current is high. If it draws very high starting current, then you must say what is the problem? The problem would be that it will create a dip in the voltage, because if 100 motors are starting on a line, it will suddenly give a dip in the voltage, whether the dip in the voltage will affect the neighboring consumers. So that is the reason why electricity boards insist that you must have a starting method by which current drawn at start is low. That is what is insisted upon by the electricity boards, right? Okay. And it is not because it will burn out, because momentary over currents are not so critical. Unless your starting time itself will take a few seconds or a very large time, then winding may get heated because of sustained high currents at start. Okay. So the critical thing is it will create a dip in the neighborhoods with if more starting current is there. Okay, because of high starting current. So we have to limit the starting current. Next is it must have sufficient starting torque to accelerate the load. Because you limit the starting current, it doesn't produce enough starting torque, again that is no use. So it should be a compromise between good starting torque and a limited starting current. Because whole purpose of this exercise is to start against a load. After all, when you are starting, so supposing there is a load here like this. This is opposing load characteristics. This is the motor characteristic. So this is the motor characteristics and this is load characteristics. Let us say this is TL. Now at start it is opposing torque is this much and the starting torque is this, so it will start. Supposing hypothetically your starting torque was somewhere here. Okay, then what would have happened? Will it start? It will not start, because the inherent motor torque is less than what the opposing load torque is. It doesn't start. So it must be more than this torque. Your starting torque may be more than what it is. Supposing you are having some type of a heavy cranes and sledgehammers and things like that. So that will have a very high starting torque. Okay. So then if this point goes somewhere here, again it will not start. Right. So again you have to increase. Therefore, what is the difference between these two? There is this will be called a TJ. TJ is the accelerating torque, which is J d omega by dt. So for a given J, it will increase, it will create an acceleration, so it will start. And it will increase and it will accelerate till Tj becomes 0, isn't it? Till the accelerating torque becomes. When will it become 0? It is this point. So here Tj is 0. So this will be the operating point. So you will notice that if the same motor, if it is connected to different loads, right? This may be one load or a fan load. Maybe there may be another load which is much lower. Then it will operate somewhere here. okay, or it can have some load somewhere here, it will operate somewhere here. So there could be different operating points of the motor it will go, but it cannot go beyond T max. Okay. So you will notice operating point is intersection between the load torque characteristics and the motor torque characteristics, and it cannot be in this zone also, it will be from 0 to T max only, right. So this is the principle behind starting and running methods of the induction motor, that it has a purpose, it has an application. Therefore application is very important for starting. So whether you are starting as a pump or a blower or a fan or a compressor or a conveyor, it depends, okay. So what is actually you are loading? So there may be some which require very high starting torque, you know, maybe so then you must have that characteristics or some mechanism to do it. So therefore the starting of the motor is very, very critical, okay. There should be sufficient torque to accelerate the load, and there may be you must be capable of starting high inertia loads. You know, if it is like a flywheel or high rotating bodies, then it will have a high starting torque and it get a sustained torque starting time. It will take its own time to have the to reach the full speed, because if you, after you start, the speed versus time, what will it go after you start? It builds up the speed, isn't it? It will be a zero speed at this is where you are switching on, so it builds up the speed and goes to the nominal speed. So it will take some time to reach, this will be the steady state speed, let us say n steady state, this is a transient. So it will reach a speed that will take some time, so let us say t steady state. So this is the starting process. Now it's possible that it will, depending upon the type of load, if it is a light load, it might just go, it may quickly rise and go to this speed. If it is a very high inertia load, it may take a very long time to start and take its speed. So T steady state will depend upon the connected load and its inertia, right. So if the current drawn is very high at starting, if it is a high inertia load, there will be enough heating in the windings because the high currents are flowing for a sustained long time, okay. But if it is a short load, or like you are feeding a light load, then you know even though the current is high, it will pick up. So the current, if you plot current versus time, so initially it will be very high, then it will come down, okay, of course at the same frequency, and then it will come to a steady state. That is how it will happen. So this one point will be the steady state point when the current has come to nominal speed. This is the starting process. So there is a starting time, starting current, starting time for starting, etc. So these are all therefore important aspects of starting. So we require starting good starting current, limited, good starting torque, high inertia loads, okay, low loss during starting. If it is high inertia load, you know, it must have a low loss, because this is one of the issues of energy conservation. If there is a load requires several number of start stops per hour, so the motor may get heated, there will be energy loss during starting, and there will be so you may sometimes you require quick starting, if needed for the application, because for example machine tools or something, you want to start quickly so that it comes to the rated speed, and there will be sudden changes, you know, or even some such applications are there where quick starting is important. Maybe starting a fan you may allow it to go, but for robots and so on, or position controls, you want a quick response under starting. So these are the factors where you have to look at the starting. So these are our requirements, but how to achieve that? How to achieve that? To achieve a desired starting, what do we do to get a good starting? We normally follow two methods, okay. One is one method is by a design. We have observed that rotor design is critical for starting performance. So you have a proper design of the rotor in both slip ring and squirrel cage. Slip ring, of course, you have a flexibility of connecting external rotor resistance, so you can afford to have a low rotor resistance internally, okay. So you can have a by proper design. or you must connect some external controllers. So you have starters. So you can have a external controllers or called starters. So these are the two methods that are used. Okay. Today we will just quickly see what steps are taken in the design. Okay. So we have seen mainly rotor design and okay. Now the rotor design, that means design of rotor mainly consists of how you put the conductors, right, and the when you have gone to the industry, if you have seen the types of rotor stampings which was used, you want to observe there are different shapes of rotor stampings. Rotor slots were of different shapes. So there is one called a single cage, where let us say you just put one conductor, this is called a single cage. Okay. Okay, this is a single cage, a conductor is here. Okay, this squirrel cage. Okay. Now there is what is known as a double cage. In double cage, you make two cages. I mean, this is called typically a double cage. This is the double cage slots in a double cage, where you have one conductor on the top cage, another conductor on the bottom cage. Let us say this is top and this is bottom. Okay. Now this has a resistance R top and reactance X top, and this is resistance R bottom and X bottom. Okay. Now generally this is RB is low and RT is high. Now initially at start, current will be mostly in the top bar because of skin effect, right, and when it is, because at starting frequency is high and running frequency is low, and running there will be more current will be flowing, therefore this will be the arrangement. So you can have a good starting and running performance through this. And the third one is called a deep bar. You make the bar deep, it is not, and then fill it up with the conductors. Okay. So this is a deep bar rotor. In deep bar, again due to skin effect, what will happen, at high frequencies current will be distributed on the top only. So resistance will be high at start because the area is small, right. Therefore R is high at start and R is low at run. Low at run because at running condition frequency is low and the current gets distributed throughout the bars. So this electromagnetic phenomena is used for the designs. Okay. Just 1 minute. Now that means, to sum up, in the top, in a double cage, top bar has high resistance and low reactance. Okay, because as we have said, this is a double cage. Right, and that means you make it thinner. Bottom bar has low resistance and high reactance. High reactance because obviously the bottom will have high reactance because it will link more fluxes. This is the leakage flux. So bottom will have more reactance. Okay, so your rotor equivalent circuit will be a two parallel circuits. Okay, this will be the rotor equivalent circuit. Let us say RT and XT and RB and XB. right? That means at start which is effective, because RT, because this is almost no current will flow through this. So you start perfect only with this. At run condition, this is more effective because this is a low resistance. A current will only flow through a low resistance parallel path, isn't it? And since the at those frequencies, the reactance will be negligible at low slip condition. So this is the method in which we can get a starting performance by rotor design. In the next class, we will discuss a little more on the deep bar and other methods of starting. Okay.